Douglas Justice is a former nursery manager, a great gardener, and horticulture instructor who has a master's degree in botany. He uses all of those skills in his job at the UBC Botanical Gardens, where he is Associate Director and Curator of Collections. And it is my pleasure to welcome Douglas Justice to Studio 4 to tell us more about cherry blossoms.
Indeed.
Indeed. How many ornamental cherries in this city? I suggested 40,000, something like that.
Something like that. I prefer to not look at the numbers of individuals, but the diversity of cherries. Mm-hmm. We have something in the neighborhood of 50 different kinds of cherries.
Really?
Yeah.
Just ornamental. That means they don't make cherries.
Well,
right, Master Gardener?
Many of them will actually make cherries,
really?
But they don't typically do that in Vancouver. Yeah, in Japan you'll find that they produce cherries, and nobody's quite sure why that is. It may be a lack of the right kind of pollinators.
Right.
But
and what are the characteristics of different cherries? The interesting ones, the exotic ones, the not so interesting ones?
Right. Well, the cherries are actually a pretty diverse lot. There are the sort of traditional Japanese flowering cherries, what we call Sato Zakura, and those are the village cherries. Those are cherries that have been sort of cultivated for, in some cases, 1,000 years in specific villages around Japan. And we're not even sure where they came from. They're probably selections or hybrids of the native cherries.
Sure.
And then there are the more modern hybrids that have been produced in the US or in Britain. And so we have a wide range on the
And Japan
streets.
has gifted Vancouver cherry trees
on a
in
couple
the
of
past,
occasions.
on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this festival, what are we celebrating exactly? What's your role with the festival first?
Well, I'm the technical advisor. I'm the person that people go to if they want to make sure that they have the right name or essentially that's what I do is do the verification of the identifications, and they keep me around. I'm not sure why, but
I'm not sure why. And it's probably a volunteer job or something.
Oh yes, it is.
Of course, that's the other part. Yeah. But I notice you have a lovely pin.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the Cherry Blossom Festival is about 5 or 6 years old, and we, I had no idea that there were actually other people who were interested in this sort of thing, and it kind of exploded on me. Fascinating that there are people who are not trained who are so devoted to the study of cherry blossoms or the
writing haiku.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I wish I was that clever. I like to read haiku.
Yeah.
But biking through the blossoms, all different things. There's a photo contest.
Yeah.
Other things like that. So how do you grow a great cherry tree?
Well,
what's the secret?
There's actually no secret. Cherry trees are actually very easy to grow. I mean, and that's when we see cherry trees on the streets of Vancouver everywhere, and people should be watering them on the boulevards, but don't, and they still do just fine. And that's a kind of testament to
survive in spite of us. They're so gorgeous.
Yeah, and so the best conditions for cherries are in the open, where there's lots of light and lots of air circulation, and where the soil is deep, so that in the summertime when we have drought, and we do have drought in the summer.
We do.
Then the roots can go deep enough to get the moisture. Barring that, we should be watering in the summer. And there are some other
Sure. Is there a variety of
issues,
cherry you can put in a pot on a deck?
There are lots of cherries. Some of the smaller growing, like the weeping cherries, things like snow fountains or Kiku Kiku Shidari Zakura,
right,
which is a little double pink. The buds, when they just open, they look like little tiny rosebuds.
Yes.
Very pretty.
They're very pretty.
A lot of the smaller plants are absolutely perfect in containers.
And pink is the color, I'm assuming. There's some white ones.
There are lots of white ones. I'm actually quite fond of well, I love all cherries, but maybe not all cherries, but I like most
of them.
cherries. And a lot of the white ones are actually much more fragrant than the pink ones.
Okay, and what determines that? The color or the species?
I'm not exactly sure why scent is more associated with white flowers, but it's probably that the flowers lack cues, color cues, and so they have to have a scent cue for the pollinator.
Okay.
It doesn't, it would surprise me if they were different pollinators for pink cherries and white cherries, but I suppose that's certainly
Probably.
possible.
Pests as far as enemies of the cherry tree?
Yeah, no, that
would be
we're starting to get a little bit more serious
No
now.
beetles or anything?
Well, not as yet. Actually, there's a little moth called the cherry bark tortrix, and a little insignificant moth. You would never know it, but she lays her eggs in the cracks in the cherry bark, and her larvae, when they hatch, they kind of tunnel around, and so it's a wood-boring larva.
Right.
And that can really sort of help the deterioration of older trees, but typically they're only found on trees that are already starting to decline. So.
Okay. So prevention?
Well, again, prevention, that's pretty complicated, because if you're dealing with an old tree, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. The bark, just as a function of age, starts to
And as
split.
they get older, do they get better?
Well,
like
yes.
us.
Yes, exactly. There are, of course, like us, some problems. They often
Arthritis?
Yes, they often accumulate problems, accumulate disease. Like there are two diseases that are actually fairly common because we have wet winter conditions here. So there's a disease called brown rot, which is a common disease for people who grow orchard fruit. You see a lot of brown rot on plums and fruiting cherries. And brown rot attacks the flowers, and when it spreads from the flowers into the tissues just behind the flowers, it kills off the tip, and then in the next few months, the cherry responds by producing a bunch of shoots behind that. And so you get this kind of witch's broom look in the cherry.
Yeah.
So there are certain cherries that are more susceptible to that, particularly the early flowering cherries, the ones that are in flower now. And then there's another disease called bacterial canker. And if you might have noticed that on older cherry trees, you get these kind of ugly bulges on the sides. And that's a bacterial disease that is basically ubiquitous. And trees that are stressed can be infected by this, particularly trees that have damaged bark, and the bacterium goes right in there. And of course, the problem with the big carbuncle on the side is that the cherry bark tortrix is attracted to that.
Well, you don't want that.
Exactly. So that just kind of accelerates the decline.
Okay, and UBC Botanical Gardens, can anybody come through the gardens?
Well, sure, yes, absolutely. It's like Van Dusen, there's a admission charge.
Sure.
But it's a reasonable charge, and we don't actually, funnily enough, we don't have many cherries on the inside of the garden. Most of our cherries are on the outside, and so people don't have to pay to see those.
Free cherry trees.
On the other hand, most of our magnolias, and we have lots of magnolias that are just starting to bloom right now, are on the inside.
So will there be a dance at the Cherry Blossom Festival, anything like that?
Indeed there will, and I'm terrible with technology, which is, I'm probably too young to say I'm terrible with technology, but what I would direct people to is our website, which is Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival.
Right.
That's
VCBF.ca.
Thank you. I have difficulty with that. And then if people go to that, then they can see
They can get
all of
the
events.
activities, all the fun. Starts April 5th, goes through the 28th. We celebrate the cherries. We even slide on the cherry blossoms, you know, in the wet days.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, they're truly beautiful. We're so blessed. I was in Victoria, and some of theirs are out.
Yeah, yeah.
So gorgeous over there.
Victoria's about usually 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah,
so
they seem
if
to be ahead of us.
Yeah, if you want to to see what's in store, go to
Yeah,
Victoria.
hop a ferry.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice to see you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Douglas Justice from the UBC Botanical Gardens. And remember, you can catch all of our conversations on YouTube or follow us on Twitter at Fanny Studio 4.